Ariana. I want to introduce a couple to you very quickly that is traveled to be. They're in the States for a couple weeks, but they're all the way from the United Kingdom, from the motherland of England. Can I just see a microphone real quick, Mike? Andy and Lina, just come quickly and greet our folks. And everyone give them a big Texas welcome as they come. And these guys, come on, we're from Texas. We know how to really welcome somebody, don't we? These guys were a part of us before there was an us. And they actually prophesied. Lina had a prophetic word over us in Sealy, Texas, in 2006, when we were prayed over to come and start the bridge. And so it's great for them to be here with us. They're going to be at Fuse on not this Wednesday, but the next Wednesday. Is that on, guys? Is he on? On February 24th, Wednesday night, Fuse. All the young adults, 18 to 30, be here because you want to hear what they have to say. But I just wanted them, they didn't know I was going to do this. I just wanted them to greet everybody and say hello. They're fresh off a plane from the UK. So, bless you.
Okay, well, it's really, really good to be here. Apologies, my voice is a bit croaky. I've got a travel throat at the moment. But some of you might remember, we were here on a Sunday morning in January last year, back at the old venue. And Pastor Duane wasn't with us that morning. Pastor Chris then drove us out here to see the outside of this building, which at that time was a possibility. And as we saw it, walked around it, hey, it's easy to say that in retrospect, isn't it? But something stirred in my spirit that you would have this place. And I remember saying that to you just afterwards the following week. So it was a huge excitement when that all happened. And so, because we're in the area, just wanted to come and be with you, see it for myself. You've done, all of you who've contributed to this, you've done a fantastic job. It's a great place to be. And we all know it's not about buildings, but we also all know that buildings can help. And it's really, really good to be here. We bring you a greeting from the United Kingdom. Lina, you're not going to get away without saying anything, so.
No, I knew that. It's just great to see the inside of this building. As Andy said, we were so excited last year to see the possibility of this, and we felt excited for you. We've watched over the last few years, I guess 10 years now, as the bridge has grown from step to step, and this is a new exciting step for you, and we're just honoured to be here taking that step with you, so thanks.
And see many of you on the 24th, I hope.
Andy and Lina were actually the first ones to notice when they walked over to the cemetery across the road, and they read on the plaque where it said it was one of the only non-segregated cemeteries in Denton County. They turned to Chris and said, "It's prophetic. Even the cemetery was all ages, all races, and all kinds. You belong here," because they know our vision. And we leapt. Chris was texting me saying, "Andy and Lina just took a photo of it and said, 'Did you see this?' I said, 'No, I missed that.'" So they actually picked up on that. So it's great to have you guys and everyone, even if you're over, don't fit in the 18 to 30s on the 24th, you ought to sneak in and we won't check your ID. It'll be okay. Thank you, Ariana. Well, happy Valentine's Day, everyone. That was a little bit weak. Happy Valentine's Day, everyone. Yeah. Today we're starting a brand new series. It's so great for me to be back home. Some of you may have seen on social media, but right after the conference, Chris and I drove to Oklahoma City for a day and a half, drove right straight back down here, got on a plane, went to England and Ireland, and was in 10 different cities in 11 days, preached 21 times, and actually about 10 or 12 different churches, and into groups of leaders, etc. Actually, Andy very graciously picked us up in England and drove us to the airport after one of our meetings, and we got to spend a couple hours with him, which was very wonderful to be able to do. And then we flew back and went straight to Oklahoma to pour into about 10 couples, young leaders that are from 3 different networks across America that came together, and Tony and Kathy Miller and another pastor friend of ours, Merle and Sue Shank, who are a part of Grubby's network. And then Chris and I poured into them for 3 days, drove right straight back down on Thursday night and Friday morning, got up and flew to Alabama to do a marriage retreat with Jody and C.J. Andrews, who helped us start the bridge 9 years ago. They were with us for the first year, 6 months before and 6 months after we started. They're now pastoring in Mississippi, so their gang from Mississippi came to Alabama, and we poured into them for 2 days, and then I got up at 3:45 this morning and got on a plane to get here to be with you because I could not wait to be back to see the bridge. It's been, I just was so excited to be here. So Pastor Chris sends her greetings because she's preaching in Mississippi this morning while I'm preaching here. So I know we've had a great couple of weeks. We had 5 people born again last week when Jay preached. Isn't that awesome? And then we got to watch from England 2 weeks ago the baptisms live streaming. And so that was a lot of fun. And I know that great things are happening at the bridge. And today, as I said, we're starting a brand new series called REconnect. REconnect, and it's got a couple of hashtags after it, which I'll talk about in just a moment. Now, some of you may not believe this. Matter of fact, 2 of the media team, which shall remain nameless, could not believe I knew these hashtags. And actually, I will, like I said, I won't say their names, Sierra and Rachel. But they were actually laughing at me because I said, Sierra, why is that so funny? She said, well, it's so modern. I said, what now? She said, those hashtags, they're so modern. I said, what am I, ancient? No. I didn't even know what they were, she said. I said, and then her and Rachel were digging out of the hole. I don't believe that she didn't know that. But anyway. But I must confess, I think for an old guy, I'm pretty in tune with a few things. You know, maybe it's just because I have kids that are 20-somethings now. But I must confess, we were in Vegas ministering, of course. Just doing the work of the Lord. And Cody and I were walking through the mall, and I saw something I think it was in Caesar's Palace, not in the casino, of course, but in the mall part. It said something about this hashtag, Bay. And I thought, I thought, well, that's got to be, in the context I've seen it on social media, it's got to be short for babe or baby. This is my bae. So instead of saying, I don't know why it's easier to say bae than baby. It's not that much more work to just throw in another. Or babe, it's all one syllable. Babe, bae, take out a B. It's not a big deal. It's just one hard consonant. But I started noticing it coming in contexts that seemed to be more than just short for babe or bae, which, by the way, the Urban Dictionary says, which is now the dictionary we go to as opposed to Cambridge. It said that babe or baby is one of the things that's short for bae. I did a little investigation. There was one guy that wrote an article that had guesses. He was actually a 20-something himself, but he didn't understand what bae meant, so he thought it was batting all eyelashes, which was an action to accompany each declaration of love over the one you care about. He thought another one was honoring a patriotic action, and it was brave as an eagle. That one was kind of weak. But my favorite, he said, he thought it was bacon and eggs. That's the one I liked and that made the most sense to me. Bacon and eggs. But actually, the more accurate definition and most popular for bay is before anyone else. In essence, it's a pledge or a declaration of sorts that this person, or in some cases, animal, pet, you've seen some of those, comes before anyone else in your heart and in your life. But the reality is, before I can love any human as bae, I need to make God bae. Not my babe, not my baby, but put him before anyone, or you could even say anything else. If I put him before anyone else, he'll teach me how to put others before myself. Maybe we ought to start a new hashtag, OBM, others before me. Another popular hashtag that you see there is relationship goals. Relationship goals. Now, this one's interesting. This hashtag can be anything from puppies from ORU for her fall break. She brought a few friends with her. And they were very demonstrative, at least a couple of them. And so every time they would see anything that they thought was cute in a relationship, it was, oh my goodness, goals. Hashtag goals. Over and over and over. Oh my goodness, goals. I'm thinking, why are they yelling goals? I thought it was at a British soccer match. Goal! Somebody told them Alex and Danielle's story sitting around the table, and one of them screamed, oh my goodness, goals! And I was really getting sick of goals. But I began to notice a common theme, not only with them, but all across social media with relationship goals. And that was this, that most of the time, the hashtag is about something you want out of a relationship. But in the kingdom, our goals should look different than that, shouldn't they? Shouldn't our goals, our relationship goals, be much different than pop culture? I believe they should. And in the next few weeks, we're going to be looking at how to reconnect relationally. How to reconnect relationally by living out a few kingdom-based relationship goals. So today's relationship goal is very simply, and I think it's appropriate for Valentine's Day, and that is to love extravagantly. I believe God designed us to love in an extravagant manner. You say, what is extravagant? Well, the definition for extravagant is exceeding what is reasonable or appropriate, absurd. You know, when you really love like God, it's absurd to the world. When you really love in a kingdom way, it seems unreasonable and almost inappropriate. Last night, a very interesting history. I don't believe I'd ever stumbled across this, and I shared it with Chris, and she posted on social media, and now everybody's sharing it. But just out of my insecurity, I want to make sure you know that I found it first. Lest you think I stole it this morning from my spouse. But in 269 AD, St. Valentine was a minister, if you will, living in Rome he was a priest living in Rome under Emperor Claudius. It was a day where love was very confused. Polygamy was rampant, and all sorts of sexual immorality ran through Roman culture. Sounds a little bit like today. But one of the things that Claudius declared was he was persecuting Christians and for lots of reasons, and he was having them killed and beaten and beheaded, and so St. Valentine, he wasn't a saint then, but Valentine began to help serve and take care of the persecuted church. He would try to reach out to them and hide them and rescue them and deliver them. It would be very similar to somebody getting passionate about helping to stop human trafficking. He was stopping human suffering by the persecution specifically of Christians. But another thing that Claudius did is he said that you weren't allowed to get married. He didn't want any young men getting married because he believed if you got married when you went to battle for Rome, you would be less likely to lay down your life. But if you just had sex with whoever, whenever, however, if you lived with people, if you had multiple partners, you wouldn't be attached to any one person, and maybe your commitment to Rome would be high enough that you would be willing to die for it. St. Valentine believed in the biblical worldview of marriage. He believed it was between one man and one woman for life. And so he was doing in secret these wedding ceremonies. He had to do them in secret because of the edict that it was illegal. When he got caught, Claudius sentenced him. One of the men who was responsible as a Roman, chosen by Claudius to judge him, was a man named Asterius. And he had a blind daughter. This blind daughter had been blind for many years, and Asterius, though, knew that Valentine was a man of God, and although he had been chosen to judge him, he had heard that he had the ability, when he prayed for people, that they got healed. So he brought his blind daughter to Valentine. He prayed over her, and God healed her, and she was completely whole. Asterius didn't have the power to stop his condemnation to death, though, because there were other people involved. He didn't want to see it happen, but it was beyond his control. So he was sentenced to be beaten, to be tortured, to be stoned, and ultimately beheaded. And he was beheaded on February 14th, 269. You say, how did we get Valentines out of that? There's not a lot of hearts and flowers and candies in that, is there? Well, I believe he had the real essence of love. He did write a letter to the girl that had gotten healed, commending her and asking her to keep living for God, but it wasn't a romantic letter. He didn't love her romantically. He just cared for her soul. And he signed it, "From your Valentine." That's where today we get the exchanging of notes, "From your Valentine." Will you be my Valentine today means a little bit different than it did in 269. You see, true love, I believe, was being displayed by Valentine. He taught these young couples when he would marry them that they were doing a very godly thing and that they were following a biblical pattern and that the essence of the love of God was to lay your life down and live for something bigger than yourself. And he understood, I believe this, that true love is the greatest revelation of God to man. See, I think the understanding of real love is the greatest revelation of God to man. However, I'm also convinced that the more we learn about love, the more we realize that we have to learn about love. We get confused with this word, especially in English. I say I love ice cream, I love steak, I love Mexican food, I love hunting, and then I turn to my wife and say, "I love you, honey. You're my bae." But I mean something, hopefully, very different by all of those statements. But in Greek, there were different words for love. I won't do a whole Greek lesson this morning, but just quickly, many of you would know them, but three of the four major ones are phileo, eros, and agape. Phileo is where we get Philadelphia. It's brotherly love. It's affection for what one would have for another. It's friendship. Eros, we have hijacked in pop culture and made it erotica and made it about sex, but in Homer's day, it was all throughout Greek literature, but it wasn't about sexual love necessarily, but it was selfish love. Eros is found nowhere in the Bible, not because it has to do with sex. It's found nowhere in the Bible because it has to do with selfishness, and God is not capable of selfish love. God has no selfishness in him, so there's no way that he could even be capable of Eros. But agape was this garden variety love that had been used, again, all throughout modern writing in Greek and in Bible days and Greek culture. But then Paul hijacks it in 1 Corinthians 13, and he gives it a definition that would have been very different to his contemporaries. He makes it the God kind of loves and gives it definition. He says, love is patient, in verse 13, 4 through 8. Love is kind and is not jealous. Love does not brag and is not arrogant, does not act unbecomingly, it does not seek its own, it is not provoked, it does not take into account wrong suffered, does not rejoice in unrighteousness, but rejoices with the truth, bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Love never fails. If the greatest revelation of God to man is love, we're obviously talking about agape love. If that's true, then the greater the revelation I have about love, the more compelled I am to share that love with the world around me, the more compelled I am to live a life of extravagant love. Now this morning I want to give you just very quickly, a few characteristics of extravagant love. If I'm going to have extravagant love, number one, extravagant love is fearless love. I believe God wants to teach us how to love fearlessly. In love, he says there's no fear in love, or perfect love, which is mature love. It casts out fear. So the more mature I become in love, the more mature I become in my understanding of love, the revelation of God's love, the more fear leaves my life. You cannot receive love and fear simultaneously. It's impossible. And another thing, you cannot cast out fear. Have you ever heard somebody praying for somebody? In the name of Jesus, I cast the spirit of fear out of you. It's kind of hoo-ha. Because this says that fear has to be displaced. If I'm holding on to this and I don't let go of it, I don't need to cast it out. I just need to replace it. See, when I get the love of God deep within my soul, deep within my understanding, it drives out fear because they cannot live in the same place. Many people won't love extravagantly because they're afraid. But 1 John 4:19 says, we love because he first loved us. Your translation may say we love him because he first loved us. That's a poor translation. In the original Greek, him was not there. He's not saying we love God because he first loved us. He's saying we love, period. The only way I can love my neighbor is because he loved me first. I'm incapable of anything other than selfish love unless I've been loved by the Father. But the greater the revelation I get of love, the greater I can love those around me. See, when I know he loves me, then I can love without fear of what man might do if I love them. See, many of us today have walls in our soul, and we say, well, what if I love someone and they reject me? Or I tried to love them and they did reject me. I tried to love them and they did hurt me. But when I understand that he loves me, even if those I love reject me, he never rejects me. Even if those I love hurt me, he will never hurt me. C.S. Lewis in his The Four Types of Love says this, and I think it's beautiful. There is no safe investment. To love at all is to be vulnerable. Love anything in your heart will certainly be wrung and possibly be broken. If you want to make sure of keeping it intact, you must give your heart to no one, not even an animal. Wrap it carefully around with hobbies and little luxuries. And avoid all entanglements. Lock it up safe in the casket or coffin of your selfishness. But in that casket, safe, dark, motionless, airless, it will change. It will not be broken. It will become unbreakable, impenetrable, irredeemable. The alternative to tragedy, or at least to the risk of tragedy, is damnation. The only place outside of heaven where you can be perfectly safe from all the dangers and perturbations of love is hell itself. What would the world look like if we loved fearlessly and recklessly? If we loved without walls, if we lived open, just giving ourselves selflessly to others like Valentine encouraged us to do. See, once you're open to love and love invades your life, you will love openly. To be like God is to love through his eyes, to see people the way he sees them, to love the unlovable. Not because they ask for it, but just because they're God's. The culmination of this is Matthew 5:44, where Jesus taught us to love our enemies. It's the highest form of sacrificial love. And when I can do that, I'm beginning to love extravagantly. The second thing I see is to love extravagantly is to love actively. You see, love without action is simply affection. Or in other words, it's not agape love at all. It might be phileo, but it's certainly not agape. If I say to Chris, say to the church, I love my church. What am I doing to serve in it? We have some of the most amazing volunteers around this place. And it shows that they love this community and love this family because they lay their life down for it. If I say I love the community, if we say we love Denton, what are we doing to serve Denton? And coming up in just a few weeks, we'll have our impact weekends, and we'll mow lawns and paint houses, and we'll serve the community, and we'll do things to invest in them. Why? Because we're saying with our actions, we really do love you. See, love is a verb, it's not a noun. And if I'm not doing something, I'm probably not loving. Now, some of you are saying, wait a minute, you can't earn the love of God. That's true. You don't do anything to earn love, but I certainly do things to show love. Grace shows us that we get the love of God not based on anything we do. How many of you are thankful for that? I didn't do anything. While I was a sinner, Christ died for me and loved me. God loved me just because, and he loves me just because, and he'll always love me just because. So we're not in this religious performance thing, but while I don't do anything to earn the love of God, once I've received it, I want to show it. Jesus said to Peter, do you love me? Peter said, of course I do. He said, then do something about it. Feed my sheep. See, the words I love you aren't cheap. They cost you your life. When I say to you every week, I love you and there's nothing you can do about it, I paid a price to say that to you. I've had all hell come against me to say that to you, but I mean it every time, and no matter what you do, I'll still love you, and there'll still be nothing you can do about it. Chris and I, when we were dating, some of you know our story, we didn't really date. I just kind of asked her dad if I could marry her before I ever talked to her about it, and he said yes, and it was a done deal. If you want to hear the rest of that story, come to the Rekindled seminar, and I'll tell you the rest of it. But when we first started spending time and going on dates after our first time together, I asked her to marry me on our first date. I looked at her and I said, it's not going to be easy. People are not going to like you. You're going to be in the ministry. When you marry me, you're marrying the church. You're marrying the ministry. I'm called to the world. Do you still want to do this? And she said, yes. Naively. It was funny, though. It took a few days. It was 2 or 3 days later before I ever said to her, I love you. I'd never told a female other than my mother and my sister that I loved them. When I would go out with girls as a teenager and they would say, I love you, I wouldn't respond. Or if I said anything, it'd be, well, I like you too. It's a great way to get rid of them if they're leechy. Because they didn't understand, why is he not reciprocating this love that I'm expressing to him? Because I did not love them. I knew I had not chosen to lay my life down for them, so I was not going to lie and say to a girl, I love you, and I had reserved not only sex for my wife, but I had reserved the 3 words, I love you, for the woman that I planned on spending the rest of my life with. And so Chris, being the young teenage girl she had told every guy she ever met she loved them. So when I wrote her a card and I wrote those words, I love you, I wanted fireworks, baby. I wanted her to fall on the floor and say, that's the most beautiful thing I've ever heard. She didn't even notice. We had a discussion about it later. But actually, when I explained it to her, she began to cry. And she said, I can't believe that you waited your whole life to say that to me. Why? Because the words I love you cost you. Jesus said in John 15:13, greater love has no man than this, and the one would lay his life down for his friends. Love is truly shown in sacrificial service, for God so loved, he gave. The third thing, quickly, is if we're going to love extravagantly, then we love faithfully. Galatians 5:6 says, faith works. We only love others by faith, not feelings. See, when we have to stay faithful to the act of loving others, and we are faithful when we stay full of faith, not in them, but in God. This is not a one-time thing. It's a consistency over a lifetime. God's love for us doesn't waver based on our performance, and our love for others shouldn't waver based on their performance. To change the world, one translation says that when Jesus came into it, he rolled up his sleeves and he moved into the neighborhood. We, like Jesus, must roll up our sleeves and move into the neighborhood of our world and lay our lives down for them, sometimes figuratively, sometimes literally. We have some friends, Andy Hawthorne in the Message Trust in Manchester, England. These guys would know them well. They take young missionaries and they throw them into the inner city in a very rough neighborhood called Salford. And we had some friends that were a part of that. Pete and Kath Atkins' daughter and son-in-law, Carl and Sarah Belcher, they moved in there because they lived in the roughest neighborhood as a brand newly married couple. Weeks into their marriage, they moved into an area. Their car was broken into and stolen 4 or 5 times in the first 3 months. They had all kinds of things come against them. They were threatened. They were almost mugged. They went through all kinds of stuff. Why? Because they said, if we're going to change this neighborhood, we're going to move into it and live here and show them that we love them enough to live right among them. After a few years, they had an event, and they did some statistics, and the police stood up and said the crime in Salford had plummeted since the Message Trust had moved in to the neighborhood. When you love people, you make a difference. Number 4, if we're going to love extravagantly, we must love purposefully. You know, you never really love anybody by accident. It's done on purpose. Love is not a feeling, it's a choice. You choose to love. So we purpose in our hearts to love people on purpose. Let me say that again. I purpose in my heart to love people on purpose. What if every day we purpose in our heart to find a way to show God's love? We'll come up in a few weeks and we'll begin to do our rack attacks again. And really it's an all-year thing, but we put an emphasis on it the week between Palm Sunday and Christmas, where we just go serve the community with random acts of kindness that really aren't so random. They're strategic because we purpose to do them. Not only do we love people on purpose, but we love them with purpose. God has many purposes in you loving the world around you, and one of them is found in John 13:35. By this all men will know that you are my disciples, if you love one another. I read that all my life and misinterpreted it. I read it, but it didn't click. He didn't say, they will know you're my disciples by how you love me. He said they'll know your disciple, and he didn't say they'll know you're my disciples by how you love them. He said they'll know you're my disciples by how you love each other. See, there's a lot of Christians that love unbelievers, they just don't love the church. There's a lot of believers that love the world, they just don't love their brother and sister. And he said we'll only change the world by loving one another. And then finally, if we're going to love extravagantly, we must love shamelessly. We can never demonstrate love and shame at the same time. And I can only live without shaming other people when I'm living without shame myself. Shame is never a motivator from God. It's a tool from the devil. See, religion shames people. You shouldn't have done that. You shouldn't have thought that. You shouldn't have gone there. Bad, bad, shame on you. Jesus never did that. He loved people shamelessly. See, there is conviction, but conviction and shame are nowhere near the same thing. Shame produces the same thing today that it produced in Adam and Eve. Adam and Eve were naked, or if you came from Decatur, where I came from, they were naked. N-E-C-K-E-D, naked. Naked. They didn't have any clothes on, but they didn't have shame. It was only when the devil told them they were wrong that they began to run. It was only after they got the knowledge of good and evil that they began to live in this thing called shame. See, when they received shame from the enemy, they did three things. First, they hid from God. But God still went looking for them. Today, you may have just squeaked in here trying to hide, but God's running after you. The second thing they did is they tried to cover themselves. God didn't hate their nakedness, they did. So they got fig leaves to hide themselves. Can I just encourage you today that whatever you've been facing, you don't have to hide it. Let God heal it. And then number three, they blame someone else. Adam said, "It's this woman. She did it." And to this day, we try to justify ourselves rather than just say, "God, I blew it. Forgive me. You're a good, good Father. And I know there's no shame." now I'm going to walk out of here free. Worship team, will you come? See, God, as I said, he'll convict you of things that are harmful because he loves you, but he'll never shame you. Romans 8:35 is a great picture of the love of God. The extravagant, endless, boundless love. It says, who will separate us from the love of Christ? Will tribulation or distress or persecution or famine or nakedness or peril or sword? Just as it is written, for your sake we are being put to death all day long. We are considered as sheep being slaughtered. But in all these things we are overwhelmingly conquerors through him who loved us. For I learned to love fearlessly and love actively, love purposefully, love faithfully, love shamelessly. You can love extravagantly, and that's a great relationship goal. You can then really make God bay. Put him before anyone or anything else. And then you can love those around you. And no matter what they do or how they act, you can be God's healing agent. I know Valentine's Day causes a lot of pain for a lot of people. There'd be a lot of people that thought, I just don't want to go to church today because I don't want to face the fact that I'm alone. I don't want to face the fact that nobody loves me. I don't want to face the fact that I didn't get a card. Some of you are going, you're not encouraging me. Stay with me. But the reality is, you're never alone. And there is one who loves you ridiculously, inappropriately, extravagantly. It's absurd how much he loves you. And if the person that has committed their love to you has failed you over and over and over, today he never has. If you've been divorced and there was a lot of pain with that, today you can receive a new love. You can get a revelation. You may have been in church all your life, but today can you get a faith for a revelation of the love of God like you've never seen it? If that's you, why don't you stand to your feet? All of us all over this building, lift our hands and let's just let the love of God begin to move through this building.